Clarity of thought is not something that happens by accident. It is cultivated. It is practiced. It is developed through discipline. When a person chooses to speak less, what they are really doing is giving themselves the space to process. They allow their mind to filter through the clutter before any word escapes their mouth. Most people rush into conversation, desperate to fill silence, afraid of the pause. But those who speak less have made peace with the pause. They understand that silence is not empty. It is full of answers waiting to be discovered. They don't waste their energy on words that have no direction. Instead, they use silence as a forge, shaping their thoughts into something sharp and precise. When they finally speak, their words cut through confusion because they've already cleared the fog in their own mind. Clarity of thought gives them an advantage in every area of life. In business, when others rush into negotiations, trying to impress with speech, the quiet individual observes, studies, and understands. They see the intention behind the words. They hear what is not being said. They feel the energy of the room. While the talker may drown in his own noise, the one who speaks less navigates with precision because their thoughts are ordered. In relationships, the same principle applies. Instead of reacting to every emotional spark, they pause, they reflect, and then they respond with intention. That ability to create space between thought and word gives them control over outcomes. They rarely regret what they say because they have already thought it through before opening their mouth. When your thoughts are clear, your words become instruments of influence. Think about it. A muddled mind produces muddled speech. A clear mind produces language that is stronger and undeniable. This is why when a person who speaks less finally shares their perspective, it lands with power. People feel the authenticity in it. They feel a depth, and that depth only comes because the words were born out of clarity, not confusion. And clarity itself is born from silence. Silence is not just the absence of noise. It is the birthplace of vision, of creativity, of wisdom. Those who speak less understand this and live it. Clarity of thought also means clarity of purpose. These individuals are not chasing every distraction. They're not compelled to involve themselves in every conversation. They recognize that every word spoken is energy spent, and so they protect that energy. Their clarity allows them to decide, is this worth saying? Will this build or will it break? Does this align with who I am and where I am going? Most people don't ask themselves those questions before speaking. They just let words spill without discipline. But the person who speaks less has trained their mind to measure the cost of expression. They know the value of holding back until the right moment. Even in moments of conflict, clarity of thought shows its power. Imagine two people in an argument. One is shouting, emotional, throwing words carelessly, while the other is calm, centered, saying little but observing everything. Holds the real power in that exchange. It is the one with clarity, the one who is not ruled by impulse. Words spoken in clarity can diffuse tension, dismantle lies, and redirect energy in a way that chaos never can. That is why the person who speaks less often finds themselves leading without even trying. Their words carry the authority of calmness, of thoughtfulness, of inner order. Clarity of thought also deepens self-awareness. People who speak less are not constantly pouring out. They are pouring in. They are listening to themselves, hearing their own thoughts, sorting through their emotions. They create the inner space required to know who they are. Most people live in reaction mode, but those who embrace silence step into creation mode. They don't just think. They don't just react. They analyze. That habit of reflection polishes the mind until clarity becomes their default state. And once clarity becomes the default, confusion loses its grip, fear loses its grip, indecision loses its grip. There is also a spiritual dimension to clarity. The one who speaks less creates room to hear the whispers that others miss. They hear the subtle direction of intuition. They are guided not by the chaos and noise, but by the stillness of truth that rises from within. They realize that clarity is not just about thinking logically. It's about connecting to something deeper, something beyond the surface. And when they speak from that place, it's not just information being shared, it is transformation being offered. This is why people who speak less often appear wise beyond their years. They seem to carry insight others cannot see because they have taken the time to see it. They are not rushing to be heard. They are preparing to be understood. Their clarity gives them patience. Their clarity gives them confidence. Their clarity gives them the ability to walk into any situation and not be shaken by noise. While the world is full of voices competing for attention, their voice stands out because it is not another echo. It is an original tone born of stillness and thoughtfulness. Clarity of thought is the foundation for growth, for leadership, for influence. It allows a person to cut away the unnecessary and focus only on the essential. It keeps them from wasting time on meaningless chatter, from wasting energy on shallow conversations. Instead, they conserve their words like treasure, using them only when the return is greater than the investment. This is why those who speak less are often remembered more. Their words linger, their phrases echo, their sentences replay in the minds of others long after the moment has passed. That is the gift of clarity. It makes words unforgettable. Power and presence is one of the most overlooked traits of people who speak less, yet it is the very thing that sets them apart the moment they walk into a room. They don't need to announce themselves. They don't need to demand attention. And they don't need to dominate conversations to be noticed. Their energy speaks before their words ever do. People feel it. The stillness, the composure, the unshakable calm. It radiates in a way that captures others without a force. This is the paradox. While the loud voice often fades into the background, the quiet presence lingers in the mind. That presence comes from within, from the discipline of silence and the depth of self-control. Power and presence is not about appearance alone, though posture, eye contact, and demeanor play their role. It's about alignment between inner clarity and outer expression. People who speak less carry themselves with a sense of certainty. They are not in a rush to prove who they are, because they already know. Their silence is not awkwardness, it is confidence. It says, I don't need to compete with noise. I don't need to fill the space. I am the space. That kind of energy naturally draws others in, not through force, but through gravity. People lean closer. They pay attention. They wait for what might be said, because presence without words is often louder than speech without substance. Consider how in any group setting there is always that one individual who doesn't say much, yet everyone notices them. Others talk over one another, eager to be heard. But when the quiet person simply shifts in their chair, lifts their eyes, or makes a subtle gesture, the atmosphere changes. Why? Because presence is power, and silence sharpens that power. When you speak less, your nonverbal communication becomes amplified. A pause, a glance, a nod carries meaning. People are conditioned to notice those who break patterns, and in a world full of noise, silence is the greatest pattern breaker of all. Power and presence also creates influence. When someone with this quality decides to speak, the words land with greater impact. They don't have to raise their voice. The room naturally quiets to hear them. This is not because of authority granted by title or position. It is authority earned by discipline, by self-mastery, by energy that others can feel. Presence is not about volume. It is about vibration. It is about the frequency of confidence, of certainty, of inner peace that cannot be shaken by external chaos. That frequency resonates with people on a level deeper than logic. They may not even know why they are drawn to listen, but they feel compelled to. The person who speaks less cultivates this power by conserving energy. They don't waste their presence on trivial matters. They don't scatter their attention across meaningless debates or shallow chatter. By choosing silence, they preserve their energy. And that preserved energy becomes presence. Think of it like a battery. The one who constantly talks is draining charge, while the one who holds silence is storing power. When the moment comes to act or to speak, they unleash that stored power in a way that cannot be ignored. There is also an aura of mystery around people who speak less, and that mystery feeds their presence. Humans are naturally curious, and silence creates questions. What are they thinking? What do they know? Why are they so calm? That curiosity magnifies their presence, because people project their own assumptions onto the silence. In reality, the quiet individual may simply be observing, but to others it feels like depth, wisdom, or authority. This perception adds to their influence without them doing anything at all. The mystery is not manufactured. It is simply the byproduct of restraint. Power and presence extends beyond personal influence. It affects how opportunities flow. Leaders notice the calm observer in the room. Decision makers trust the one who doesn't rush to speak but waits until they have something meaningful to add. In moments of crisis, people look toward the quiet presence for stability. They may not always be the most vocal, but they are often the ones vocal, because presence creates trust, and trust is the foundation of leadership. In social settings, this same presence makes people memorable. When everyone else is busy trying to impress, the one who doesn't try stands out the most. This balance is not lack of value. It is value waiting to be revealed. People remember the way they made them feel, the calmness they carried, the steadiness they displayed. Presence lingers long after words are forgotten. Most of what people say dissolves in the air, but presence imprints itself on their memory. At its core, power and presence come being fully grounded in the moment. Those who speak less are not distracted by the need to respond instantly. They are not waiting for their turn to talk while half listening to others. They are present, truly present, absorbing everything, holding space, giving their full awareness to what is happening. That level of attention creates a magnetic force, because most people are starved for genuine presence. When they encounter it in someone else, they feel seen, they feel acknowledged, they feel valued. And that feeling is unforgettable. The people who speak less often carry influence that far outweighs their words. They embody the truth that silence is power, and that silence is not emptied for fullness. They are grounded, centered, unhurried, and in that state, they naturally become a force that others recognize and respect. Their power does not come from trying to be heard, but from mastering the art of being felt. And that is a power that cannot be faked or fabricated, only cultivated through silence. Awareness and self-mastery. Deep observation is one of the most defining characteristics of those who choose to speak less, and it is the hidden source of their wisdom, influence, and understanding. Most people listen to reply, not to understand. They watch, but they don't see. They hear, but they don't register the truth beneath the words. The one who speaks less, however, has themselves to absorb more. They do not rush to insert themselves into every conversation. They step back. They hold silence. And in that silence, they notice things that slip past the majority. Their eyes catch subtle detail. Their ears pick up tone shifts. Their intuition reads the energy in the room. While others are distracted by their own voices, the observer's learning, gathering, and understanding the deeper reality beneath the surface. Deep observation is a discipline. It requires humility to remain quiet when your ego wants to prove a point. It requires patience to let others talk without interruption. It requires presence to notice not only what is being said, but how it is being said. A person who observes deeply understands that communication is layered. Words may say one thing, but body language may say another. The silence between sentences often reveals more than the sentences themselves. By speaking less, they give themselves permission to perceive those layers. They allow themselves to step into the role of learner, and in doing so, they often understand people far better than those who never stop talking. When someone develops deep observation, they gain access to knowledge others miss. They can sense when a person's confidence is genuine or forced. They can tell when someone is excited but hiding nervousness. They notice the flicker in the eyes, the pause in the breath, the slight shift in posture. All of these tiny signals are constantly being broadcast. But most people are too consumed with their own words to notice. The quiet observer, however, is tuned into those signals, and that tuning gives them insights that feel almost intuitive. What looks like instinct to others is often the result of years of disciplined observation. In business, deep observation is a priceless asset. Negotiations, meetings, and partnerships are not just about the spoken agreements. They are about the unspoken truth. The one who speaks less can read the room, feel the tension, and anticipate objections before they're voiced. They see beyond the presentation and in the motive. This gives them an edge that constant talkers lack. Instead of getting caught up in their own performance, they are decoding the performance of others. Their silence creates a vantage point, a higher ground from which they can make decisions with clarity and precision. In personal relationships, deep observation fosters connection and trust. People who speak less tend to listen more. And when you truly listen to someone, they feel understood. They feel valued. Observation is not just about noticing flaws. It is about noticing needs, desires, and emotions that the other person may not even express directly. The quiet observer pays attention to the small things, the change in tone when someone is tired, the hesitation in their voice when they are hiding pain, the excitement in their eyes when something matters deeply to them. This ability to notice without being told allows them to respond in ways that strengthen bonds and deepen trust. Observation also grants the power to learn from life without always being in the spotlight. The person who speaks less doesn't need to be the center of every story. They learn by watching the experiences of others. They see the mistakes people make, the strategies they use, the emotions they reveal. They don't just consume information. They analyze it, store it, and use it. This gives them a depth of wisdom that others might take decades to acquire. Every room they enter becomes a classroom. Every conversation becomes a lesson, and every interaction becomes a chance to grow. There's also protect quality and deep observation. By noticing the subtle cues, the quiet individual often avoids traps that others fall into. They sense when someone is being insincere. They notice when opportunities are too good to be true. They recognize patterns in behavior that reveal character long before it becomes obvious. This foresight allows them to make choices that safeguard their future, while others who rush headfirst into situations often find themselves paying the price of their lack of awareness. Observation is not passive, it is active engagement with reality on a deeper level. The quiet observer is not absent from the conversation. They are fully present, more present than the talkers who are lost in their own words. They see connections others overlook. They notice trends that others dismiss, and they pick up lessons hidden in plain sight. Over time, this consistent practice of seeing deeply shapes their perspective. They become the kind of person others turn to for guidance because they always seem to notice what no one else saw. Deep observation also sharpens creativity. By paying attention to details, patterns, and human behavior, they gather raw material that fuels original thinking. Artists, inventors, leaders, and thinkers who speak less often draw their inspiration from what they observe. They take in more than they give out, and that intake becomes the foundation for breakthroughs. Creativity thrives those who observe deeply because they are always collecting insights, storing impressions, and piecing together fragments into something meaningful. Ultimately, people who speak less and observe deeply walk through life with an advantage that is invisible but undeniable. They understand situations better. They understand people better. And most importantly, they understand themselves better. By choosing to observe rather than always express, they cultivate a depth of awareness that becomes their greatest strength. While others scatter their energy outward through endless talk, they draw their energy inward through careful observation. And that inner storehouse of knowledge, awareness, and wisdom becomes the very thing that elevates them in every area of life. Emotional control is one of the strongest qualities that separates people who speak less from who speak without pause. And it is the reason why their words carry such a different kind of weight. Speaking less is not about being shy or withdrawn. It is about mastery, mastery over impulses, mastery over reactions. Mastery over the emotional storms that rise up in the mind and demand an outlet. Most people speak because they are pushed by feelings. They react in anger. They blurt out in fear. They try to impress in excitement. But those who have chosen the path of silence know that words born out of unfiltered that can destroy opportunities, damage relationships, and weaken influence. By controlling their emotions, they also control their speech. And by controlling their speech, they control the impression they leave on the world. When you study someone who speaks less, you notice they're calm in situations where others lose control. In arguments, when tempers flare and voices rise, they remain grounded. They don't jump into the fire with reckless words. They stand back and let the flames die before stepping forward with precision. This is not suppression of emotion. It is redirection of emotion. They feel everything that everyone else feels. But instead of letting those feelings control them, they process them internally, sort them, and decide how best to release them, if at all. This inner discipline creates an aura of strength because everyone else can feel. Here is someone who cannot be baited, cannot be provoked, cannot be manipulated by emotional games. The ability to hold back words until the emotion has settled gives them an advantage in every interaction. Think of how many regrets are tied to things said in the heat of the moment. A single sentence spoken in anger can fracture trust that took years to build. A careless remark made in frustration can cost opportunities that will never return. Those who speak less avoid these traps because they understand that silence in the moment of emotional heat is more powerful than words they cannot take back. They know that restraint is not weakness. It is a kind of strength that very few people ever master. Emotional control also brings clarity. Emotions are like storms. They cloud judgment. They distort perception. It makes small things seem bigger and big things seem impossible. By choosing silence during those storms, the quiet individual allows the clouds to pass before making decisions. Their words and actions are not reactions to the storm, but responses from a place of calm. This calm makes their presence reassuring to others. In families, friendships, teams, and businesses, people gravitate to one who can remain steady when everyone else is unstable. That steadiness is born from emotional control and is magnified by the habit of speaking less. People who have mastered this control also understand timing. They know that not every emotion needs to be expressed immediately. They recognize that holding silence at the right moment can be more powerful than speaking 1,000 words. In negotiation, silence unsettles the other side, forcing them to reveal more. In conflict, silence shows that they are not rattled. In relationships, silence demonstrates that they are thinking rather than reacting. This mastery of timing turns their silence into a strategic tool, one that amplifies the impact of their words when they finally choose to speak. Emotional control is also tied to self-respect. The one who speaks less does not allow anger, fear, or jealousy to dictate their identity. They know who they are, and because of that, they refuse to let emotions drag them into behavior that betrays their true character. This control over self creates consistency, and consistency builds trust. Others learn that they can rely on this person, not just when times are good, but when pressure is high. Their restraint becomes a shield, protecting not only themselves, but also those around them from the damage of uncontrolled emotion. There is also an inner freedom that comes with emotional control. Most people are slaves to their emotions. They are happy only when things go their way. They are broken when challenges come. They lash out when hurt. But those who speak less cultivate the freedom to choose. They may feel anger, but they choose peace. They may feel fear, but they choose faith. They may feel impatience, but they choose patience. This freedom to choose how to respond rather than react makes them powerful. And because they do not spill words recklessly, they conserve their strength for what truly matters. In leadership, this quality is priceless. Teams and organizations don't crumble because of lack of talent. They crumble because of poor emotional control at the top. Leaders who run, who lash out, who panic, create instability in everyone around them. The quiet leader, the one who speaks less and manages their emotions, creates stability. Their silence in the storm tells everyone else, we are safe, we are steady. We are moving forward. That level of composure builds loyalty and confidence. People trust those who can master themselves, and emotional control is the highest form of self-mastery. Even in personal growth, emotional control is foundational. The ability to sit in silence with one's emotions without the need to immediately express them creates space for growth. It allows the individual to reflect, to understand why they feel what they feel, to trace the roots of their triggers, and to choose healthier responses over time. Speaking less accelerates this process because silence is the environment in which self-awareness grows. The more they practice holding their emotions instead of broadcasting them, the stronger their inner world becomes. Those who cultivate emotional control and through silence eventually radiate an unshakable confidence. People sense that they are not easily moved, not easily provoked, not easily broken. This makes them magnetic, because everyone is searching for that kind of steadiness in a world where emotions rule most people's lives. Their calm becomes contagious. Their restraint becomes admired. Their silence becomes respected. And it all stems from the decision to speak less, to discipline the impulse, and to let emotional storms pass before choosing the power of response over the weakness of reaction. Influence through economy of words is one of the most powerful traits of people who speak less. And it is a quality that instantly sets them apart. It's that when someone rarely speaks, their silence builds anticipation. Anticipation creates value. The fewer words they use, the more people pay attention to the ones that are spoken. Contrast that with someone who talks constantly. Words flow endlessly, yet little is remembered. Their voice blends into the noise. Their message loses weight, and their presence becomes easy to overlook. But when a person who speaks less to share their perspective, the room naturally leans in because everyone has learned that when they speak, it matters. Their words are not wasted. They are purposeful, and that purpose creates influence. This economy of words is not about withholding for the sake of mystery. It is about intention. The quiet person understands that words carry energy, and energy should not be wasted. They choose their language carefully, stripping away the unnecessary, and only the essential remains. What they say is often sharp, concise, and layered with meaning. This makes their voice resonate at a deeper level because people don't just hear their words. They feel the thought, the conviction, and the clarity behind them. The less they say, the more impact each phrase has, and over time, their reputation becomes one of authority. People may not remember every word spoken by the talker, but they remember almost every sentence spoken by the one who values silence. Influence grows when people trust that you don't speak carelessly, and this is where the person who speaks less thrives. Others learn that when they finally choose to say something, it has been filtered, weighed, and considered. This makes their opinions credible. Even in disagreement, their restraint earns respect. While others argue endlessly to prove their point, the quiet individual might make one simple statement that shifts the entire conversation. They don't try to overpower volume. They influence with precision. The power of their few words is not in quantity, but in quality. And quality always leaves the deeper mark. In leadership, this trait is invaluable. Leaders who speak endlessly often dilute their own message. They bury the wisdom in a flood of words, and eventually their voice becomes background noise. But leaders who master the economy will know how to deliver a message that lands and lingers. A short phrase from it can inspire a team for weeks. A brief comment can redirect the course of a project. A simple observation can unlock solutions others struggle to find. Their silence between words gives space for others to process, reflect, and internalize. And that space is what makes their influence last. Even outside of leadership, in friendships, relationships, or casual interactions, influence through fewer words creates an aura of wisdom. The one who speaks less does not interrupt constantly, does not rush to share every thought, does not try to dominate every exchange. Instead, they listen, they absorb. And when they do speak, people naturally give them the floor. The respect is earned because of the restraint. People know that what is coming is worth listening to. In this way, their influence is not forced. It is granted willingly by others who recognize the value in their voice. There's also a psychological element to this economy of words. Humans naturally assign more importance to things that are rare. When words are scarce, they are treated as treasures. This is why a compliment from someone who speaks less carries far more weight than the same compliment from someone who gives them freely every hour. This is why criticism from the quiet person stings deeper, because it's rare and therefore meaningful. Scarcity amplifies value, and the quiet individual uses this truth without even trying. Their silence creates rarity, and their few words create impact. Influence has a practical advantage in persuasion. Long speeches can tire listeners, but concise points strike like arrows. The quiet person knows how to wait, observe, and then drop the one statement that cannot be ignored. It may be a truth no one wanted to admit, a perspective no one had considered, or a question that shifts the entire direction of thought. That one statement becomes the point of the conversation, not because it was long, but because it was perfectly timed and precisely chosen. This level of influence is not about dominating the conversation, but about directing it with minimal effort. The discipline to hold back words until they matter also builds self-control, and that self-control translates into credibility. People admire those who are not slaves to their tongue, those who do not feel compelled to say everything they think. The ability to withhold shows maturity, shows strength, and it shows mastery over self. That mastery itself is influential. Because influence is not only about what you say, it is about who you are. The quiet person influences as much by their restraint as by their expression, and that balance creates an authority that endless talking can never achieve. Over time, this economy of words becomes a personal brand. People come to expect wisdom when the quiet individual speaks. They associate their voice with value, their silence with strength, and their presence with authority. Even if they do not intend to, their influence grows naturally because the world craves clarity in the midst of noise. And in a culture that often rewards the loudest voice, the one who chooses silence and then speaks with purpose rises above the crowd without competing for attention. Their influence is earned not by volume, but by value. That value is amplified every time they decide to speak less, but mean more. Inner growth and self-mastery flourish most in silence. And that is why people who speak less often appear to live with the depth and balance that others struggle to achieve. When you are not constantly projecting outward, you are free to turn inward to explore the vast world within yourself. Most people spend their energy spilling words, explaining themselves, justifying their choices, filling space with noise. They rarely pause to listen to their own inner dialogue, to question their patterns, to reflect on their values. But the individual who chooses to speak less has created the space for reflection, and reflection is the soil in which growth takes root. Speaking less allows for the practice of self-awareness. In silence, you begin to notice your thoughts. You see how quickly your mind jumps, how emotions influence your perspective, how desires drive your decisions. This awareness is the first step to mastery, because you cannot master what you are unwilling to observe. By watching their own thoughts and emotions before turning them into words, people who speak less learn to understand themselves in ways that others cannot. They recognize their trigger, they understand their patterns, they trace the roots of their behaviors. And with this understanding comes the ability to make better choices, to break cycles, to build a stronger version of themselves. This inner growth is not instant. It is gradual, shaped by consistent moments of silence and restraint. Every time they choose not to speak, they create a pocket of awareness. In that pocket, they learn patience, they learn discipline, they learn the strength of not needing to be heard all the time. This patience becomes a virtue that spills into every other area of life. They do not rush into decisions. They do not chase validation. They do not act out of desperation. Their silence teaches them to wait, to listen, and to move only when the time is right. That kind of discipline is self-mastery in action, and it becomes a defining part of who they are. People who speak less also discover that silence connects them to their intuition. The constant chatter of the world drowns out the inner voice that guides us. But in stillness, that voice grows louder. They become attuned to subtle guidance, to insights that seem to come from nowhere. This is not accident. It is the fruit of creating inner space. When you are not busy filling the air with your own words, you begin to hear the whispers that were always there. And often, those whispers provide more direction than any external advice ever could. This connection to intuition strengthens their confidence because they are no longer dependent on the opinions of others to guide them. They carry a sense of inner certainty that is rare and powerful. Another element of self-mastery that grows through speaking less is emotional balance. When you resist the urge to voice every thought and every feeling, you develop the capacity to sit with your emotions instead of being ruled by them. You learn to process anger without exploding, to hold sadness without drowning in it, to feel joy without needing to broadcast it. This ability to manage emotions internally without spilling them carelessly is a high form of mastery. It creates stability in life, stability in relationships, and stability in decision making. The quiet person becomes someone others rely on because they do not get tossed around by every emotional wave. They remain steady, grounded, and present. Inner growth also involves aligning with purpose, and speaking less plays a critical role in this. When you are silent, you can hear what truly matters to you. You begin to separate your authentic desires from the noise of external expectations. The world is full of voices telling you what you should want, who you should be, how you should live. If you are always speaking, always reacting, you absorb those voices without realizing it. But the person who cultivates silence filters those voices out. They listen within, they reflect, and they find clarity about their own path. This clarity of purpose is the foundation of true self-mastery, because when you know who you are and where you are going, distractions lose their power over you. The journey of inner growth through silence also teaches humility. People who speak less recognize that they don't always need to have the last word. They don't always need to prove their knowledge. They don't always need to dominate the room. This humility creates space for learning, for listening, for evolving. They absorb wisdom from others, from experiences, from life itself, without the arrogance of assuming they already know it all. That openness accelerates growth as every moment becomes a teacher. While the talk away is time trying to impress, the quiet person uses time to expand. Self-mastery gained through silence is not about perfection. It is about progress. It is about becoming better today than yesterday, stronger this year than last, wiser in every season of life. It is about learning how to discipline the tongue, the emotions, and the mind so that they all work together rather than against each other. The less they speak, the more they observe. The more they observe, the more they learn. The more they learn, the more they grow. And in that cycle of silence and reflection, they slowly become unshakable from within. People who speak less often embody a kind of quiet power because their inner growth has given them mastery over themselves. They are not dependent on the approval of others, not enslaved by emotions, not scattered by confusion. They live with clarity, with purpose, with strength that comes from within. This self-mastery is what makes them stand out without trying, influence without forcing, and lead without demanding. It is the natural result of choosing silence not as weakness, but as the most fertile ground for growth and transformation.